for your area. The genes in this corn plant produce Bacillus thuringiensis, which is a bacterial, it's like a protein in a bacteria. And so because they produce that, anytime these worms get on your corn plants, they die because they're eating something that's detrimental to the digestive tract. And so, you don't see them anymore, but they're still there. They're still out there. They're still reproducing. They're still growing. They're still, they're still a species. They're not extinct. And so the only reason that they're not killing our corn like this anymore is because of the fact that we put that resistance in there. And little facts like that is what's important about whenever you go out to plant your garden. It can also be, just look at it. That's all you got to do. My professor always used to say, when you go out to your crop, the most important thing is your shadow. You should make sure your shadow was over every single plant in your garden, so that way you know every little detail about every little plant. And unless you're doing big rows, they maybe hop on your tractor and watch as you're driving along. And then this rust here too. And so, but because of that, you've got to, like I said, you got to start thinking from the beginning and work your way through. Don't always immediately go, oh no, I've got this corn earworm, whatever am I going to do? You just start from the beginning, know that you're planting the right variety, know that you're doing the right thing, and then just slowly work your way through all this. So then as far as like the cucurbits go, we were talking about some of these other guys, like the squash vine board. This is the one that we couldn't reach because he's inside the vine. So there's a mechanical, so we're going to go back to the beginning, right? So planted a resistant variety, that didn't work. Now we still have the squash vine borer, he's affecting our squash vines. Next up, we're going to do maybe we've got some 8 biotic factors that'll help out with this. No pests for these guys really, so we're going to move on from that. What's next? Okay, well, what about cultural controls? What can I do myself with my hands to come out here and fix this issue? And that's where you can take a razor blade and run it down the length of the stem of your cucumber plant, and you can reach your finger down into that stem and kind of feel along to find where those little worms are and just squish them. And so that works for anyone who's got like 5, 6 plants, something like that. And so then let's say, well, that's not going to work for me because I've got 2 acres of cucumbers or something like that. And then that's where we moved on. Okay, well, my mechanical controls, I can't find anything to fix that. So now we're going to move on one step farther, and we're going to go to organic pesticides. And so with organic pesticides, our first option for a squash vine borer like this guy needs to be something that's systemic, that's going to penetrate the plant tissue and move down into the area where this guy is living. So when he comes along to do his munching, he's going to eat some of that pesticide and kill him. And so things that do that is going to be like Bacillus thuringiensis, spinosad, a few other guys like that are going to come through, and what they'll actually do is they'll penetrate through the plant material and be within the cell walls of the plant. And then that will allow this guy to come in contact with those chemicals. So let's say we've done that, we've put our organic chemical down, and we still haven't been able to kill these guys off. Our cucumbers are still looking terrible, and we're freaking out, and we don't know what to do. Now let's move on to a heavier insecticide, and we're going to come through here with something like I think imidacloprid has a vegetable label, so maybe like imidacloprid or something like that. Something that's systemic and it's going to move through the plant tissue. It's not going to sit on top. And so the other thing we're talking about too with like the squash bugs or the leaf-footed bugs or anything like that, we talked about how pyrethrins aren't as effective on them, but it is on the label for them. And so, it's effective, but you need to come in contact with them. And so that's a big thing of, when you're culturally going through and you're putting down these chemicals, you need to think about, okay, well, is this a contact chemical? Is this a systemic chemical? Is this something that they're going to have to ingest? Is this something that I can just get on top of them, Yeah, think about how that chemical works before you go out and apply it. Because let's say it's a contact chemical like permethrin. Permethrin, you want to come in contact with the bugs. So are you going to come through your garden and spray it from the top down? Or are you going to come through and spray it from the bottom and hit the leaf surface where these bugs are hiding up underneath it? And so that's another important thing too, is think about is, well, if I come through and I spray my chemical and I get it all on the surface of the leaf up here, but all the bugs are hanging out down here, I'm not going to kill anything with a contact pesticide. And so then that's why you want to make sure that you're getting the whole leaf surface covered. They don't want anywhere to be able to go hide in any nooks and crannies or crevices or anything like that. You want to make sure you completely coat the surface of the plant with a nice fine mist of whatever pesticide it is that you're using. So we talked about the squash bugs, and then so like okra. If you ever plant okra in, let's say like February, it's not going to do anything because of the cold weather. And then that too is, again, going back to integrated pest management, that cold weather is that pest that's coming through and causing stress to your okra and not allowing it to grow properly. And so that's where, like, again, just little things of just thinking of what time do I plant? What variety do I plant? All those things need to always be on your mind constantly, every day, whenever you go out there and looking at everything. And then so nematodes. And so we talked about solarization, talked about planting resistant varieties to nematodes. Some other things that you can do too also is there's predatory nematodes that actually eat and kill these nematodes here. And then another thing you can do too is also, what do you call that, like a trap. So you come through and, like he was saying with the ryegrass, that ryegrass, the roots are going to get all of these nematodes latched onto them. And so then when you come through and you get rid of that plant material, those nematodes are all still, so if you look at these little root nodules here, what happens is this little worm crawls into the root and he settles in and he takes his mouth and he bites onto the vein in that root and he sucks nutrients out from right there. And then what he does is he makes the root make a little house for him and puts a little bubble around him, and then he lives there for the rest of his life. And so whenever you come through with that, like the ryegrass or maybe some bunk tomatoes you're just throwing out there to get rid of these nematodes, they'll latch on, and if you can pull this material up before these guys reproduce and put seed or put their eggs back out into the soil, then you can rip them out of the ground when you rip that tomato plant out, and then they won't be there anymore because you've got them all right there in that root mass, and then you can get rid of that, and then you can pull nematodes out this way. This right here, the solarization, that's like one of those things I would do as like a last-ditch effort. The problem with solarization is you're killing off all of your beneficial bacteria in your soil profile. And so this is, again, why it's so important to come through and make sure that you start off with cultural practices, mechanical practices, all these things like this first, before you start moving to chemicals and basically burning everything alive, because you want those beneficial insects there. There's a place called Antique Rose Emporium in Independence, Texas. And he does it all in one greenhouse. And he had really big issues constantly with powdery mildew, all of these different bacterial diseases that were killing his rose cuttings before he could propagate them and sell them. And so what he did was he came through with a compost tea. He made compost tea, just take molasses and some other things like that and get a microbe tea brewing. And he would come through every spring whenever he was taking his cuttings, and he would put that compost tea on top of all of his cuttings instead of fungicides and all the other things he was using. And those beneficial bacteria will populate that leaf surface and actually prevent the bugs, coat the leaf surface, and then anytime any sort of pest or any sort of fungus or any sort of thing tries to come in, there's no room, there's no more homes left on this, because all those homes are taken up by beneficial bacteria, taken up by beneficial fungi and all that stuff like that. And so that good stuff's got to keep looking for something else to go find and infect. And so then that's the other thing too. So you need to realize that there's a disease triangle. You need to realize that there's your abiotic, like stress factors like drought, too much sun, too little sun, all that kind of stuff like that. The other factor is the resistance thing, whether or not that plant is resistant to that disease or not. And then the last thing is going to be the availability of the plant material to allow that disease in. And so it boils down to, if you can keep your environmental controls right, you've knocked off that top part of the triangle, and then most of the time these diseases can't take hold. It's like with powdery mildew. If your plants are moist constantly, it's a really humid environment and they're always retaining moisture on them, powdery mildew spores germinate and infect the plant within 3 days. And so if you can come through with an organic fungicide or anything like that and spray your plants, or beneficial microbes or anything like that, spray your plants down really good and then come back out, and you'll notice the ones that didn't get sprayed will have powdery mildew because of that environmental factor being there, whereas the other ones, because you made sure that you had a dry, warm environment, that disease is never going to take hold properly. You need to find a way that you can keep this guy from getting to the potatoes. And so that's the whole point of integrated pest management. How do I keep my pest away from my produce? And the answer is always going to be environment, cultural practices, or what chemical can I use? And you always start from the top and work your way down. Bacillus thuringiensis is what keeps all of your cole crops like this healthy and doing well. And like I said, it's just a bacteria, and all it does is it comes in and shuts down the nervous system of whatever pest it is that you're dealing with. And the same thing with spinosad soap. Spinosad soap's a really cool one too, and this is my favorite pesticide out of all of them. Spinosad soap is actually derived from a bacteria that was growing in puddles outside of a factory in Thailand, I think, or something like that. And realized that there was dead grasshoppers all over these puddles. Like you'd go down and you'd see this puddle of water, and then around it there would be all these dead grasshoppers. And so the guy was like, that's really cool. I wonder what's in that water that's killing all those grasshoppers. And so that's where he found this bacteria, spinosad ID. And there's two species, the A species and the D species, and they took, between the two of those, pulled out the protein that's responsible for killing the bugs and called it spinosad with an AD because of the A and D species of bacteria. And so because of that, they take that product, and what happens is they put it on the plant, it moves into the plant tissue, bug eats the plant tissue, and then this chemical actually, so our nervous system uses phosphorus as a, what would you call that, like a gateway. So like anytime you go to move your fingers or something like that, there's a phosphorus pathway that kind of moves down. It's like a chain reaction that happens that triggers you doing whatever it is you want to do. Bugs have a similar thing, but theirs is going to be slightly different. And so then that's where this chemical affects their neurological pathway, not our neurological pathway. And so then that's why stuff like spinosad is going to be so much safer for you guys compared to pyrethrins and all those things like that, because pyrethrins affect the phospholipid gateway that all animals use for their nervous system, which is why whenever you come through and you spray that stuff, you need to make sure that you put on protective equipment